Alright, my name is Samuel George, and this is part 2 of assignment 5 for Comp533. In this part, we're going to do the same thing we did in part 1, going over serialization tester, but we're going to do it with a textual serializer instead of the binary serializer. I moved the breakpoints around just to illustrate that it is textual serialization as opposed to binary serialization. Just a little bit background, the way I did it was I created a wrapper class for string buffer here that has many of the same get and puts as your string buffer does, and so the commands and the deserialization process and the algorithm were very similar, but just with slightly different underpinnings. So just to run our tester here, again, I've set the serialization factory to textual serialization. So without without printing or anything like that, we're just going to run this same serialization tester. And as you can see, we have the same output as with the binary serializer and successfully serialize and deserialize. And we're next going to run over the same breakpoints with tracing that we did with the first part. Okay. So again, we're going to do a dispatching serializer. Again, we're going to serialize based on the class type, and this is going to send to all the other kinds. Okay, so as you can see, we've called integer serializer, but this time we've stopped in the tracking string buffer, which is basically just a string buffer. Tracking string is my wrapper class for string buffer, so that it has a position associated with it, and that's what we're going to use. So we're going to do an output string buffer. So this is integer, and of course for our deserialization, we come and we call deserialize, but this time we're deserializing a tracking string buffer as opposed to a byte buffer. And this in turn is going to call the integer serialization deserialize method, but this time in the tracking string buffer case. Okay, so that's an integer, and again the outputs here are going to look very much the same, except we are going to, instead of having a byte buffer, we have a string buffer. Okay. And that's what we see. So let's go ahead and go through these quickly. So we have a short we're going to serialize, short we're going to deserialize, long we're going to serialize, long we're going to deserialize, float, or double, excuse me, we're going to serialize. Again, I put it in this instance here so we can see that we are doing this all textually. Float, serialize, float, deserialize, string, serialize, string, deserialize, Boolean, serialize, Boolean, deserialize, enum, serialize, enum, deserialize, array, serialize, array, deserialize, again, object array, all those objects we've already gone over, so just serialize those. Array list serialize, array, so here we are serializing null for the first time because the last element of this array list is null. So again, null serialize. When we go to deserialize, we're going to deserialize our array list. And null is the last element, so we're going to deserialize that. Okay, and again, looking at all of the dispatches down here, should all look very familiar. Vector, vector, deserialize. Map, hash map, hash map, deserialize. Table, hash table, again, same hash table, and we're going to do set, hash set, Again, same thing. Okay, and our list. All right, so we're going to do our recursive. This should in turn do the reference serializer, same one as last time. So we have a reference serializer and our reference deserializer. Okay, let me see if we output that correctly. We're going to do a bean now. So you can see in our bean serializer and our bean deserializer. Another bean, same thing. Next we're going to do a list. So this is our history. We're going to serialize. And history deserialize. Okay, object history is going to be the same. We're just going to do it all here. And lastly, reference serialization again. And again, with the serialization alternative, we can see that with tracking string buffer and the same, we were able to serialize as an array list and deserialize as a vector. So we have done the same, serializing base classes, dispatching the class based on class name is correct. We serialized null, we did enum, array, bean, and list, and then a non-tree self-referencing data structure. And that wraps up part 2 of assignment 5.